Hello explorers and welcome to another video. Today we are going to talk about Windsurf. And let's start by just switching over to my screen here. And here you see an application that has a very simple GUI. It has a login flow that is pretty much send me an email and you get the verification link. So if I just enter one email here, send it over, and then go over to my spam folder because it sends through a service called Mailgun, and they haven't really figured that spam issue out. And then I get this verification link. So if I go to that link, I get logged in. So here we have the login page. Welcome back, and account overview, member since, account status, recently activated. I can also look at the management of the users. I can log out, and I also have this buy token page. And here you can buy token, you can see your balance of tokens, and you have different packages here. And the tokens should be able to be bought using PayPal. And if I try that out, I currently get to PayPal and get this error message. Things don't appear to be working at the moment, which is a little bit sad. It doesn't work. But this is where this application is. So what's so special about having this application? It's not a very super advanced site. It has somewhat the same design language, even though I'm not really that super impressed by it. Well, the point of this site is that I have not written a single line of code in order to create this one. So I've done something that some people call vibe coding. I say it's pretty much a manager of a really stupid intern. So what we have done is using this interface called Windsurf. It's pretty much a Microsoft code editor with a prompt engine on the side. And it doesn't really matter which kind of LLM you are using. All of them are pretty much useless at creating code. So you will have the same interface no matter what option you choose. Currently I use a particular LLM that is designed to be better at coding. So what I've done here is running this for a whole week on a site that probably would have taken me about a couple of days to implement. And if I have done it just a couple of hours in the evening, well, then perhaps I would spend a week doing this. But this has been running off and on for almost 7 days, and we haven't really produced that much. And there have been a lot of frustrating discussions with this LLM in order to create this. So what we can see here, what it has created is a bin folder with some cleanup tokens script, so we can remove login tokens, and a README. And the README has some information here, so it's a little bit involved here, at least how you set up the cron job and so on. So that's interesting. We have this database SQL in the doc folder. This was something that I asked for. I wanted an SQL statement where you could have the different creating the database somewhere locally. But of course it created this folder migrations where it had a couple of migration scripts to add even more. Never asked for that, but that's fine, I guess. Then I have this etc folder where I said create a config file for all the configuration, and it did. And also the example file for what should be in that configuration file. But at some point it didn't really like to have the database information in the same config file for some odd reason. So now I have a database PHP file with just the database information. I don't know why. when it wanted to implement the PayPal solution, which was the last thing I did, it has created both an old and a new client. And I pretty much started with saying, I want this kind of login flow. So I want the login flow where it sends me an email and I verify with a link. And it did that pretty well, but it just said, okay, now I will send an email using your mail command locally, and everything else you have to set up yourself. And I said, that's not good enough. I want a real solution. So what do you suggest? Yeah, try to use any of these ones. So it suggested a couple of them. One of them was so stupid that I couldn't even create an account at them, so I will not mention their name. It's not important. Mailgun, at least I could create an account, but all the emails sent from them is ending up in my spam folder, so I would not recommend them either. But at least it was able to create this connection. I think it spent about a day or 1.5 days in order to get that to work. Fine, I was pleased with that setup. And then it created this dashboard, which I never asked for anything on this dashboard. It just created it, and it looked fine. So yeah, keep that then. But it didn't look like that. It was a totally different design. And then I said I want a router. Can I create a router where you have both this PHP command where you start a server, and it should be able to run in the Feather server as well later on. And can you do that in one go? And it tried to do it, but just failed miserably, because that is not possible. So it tried to do something and be really really help me, but it didn't help me because it just should have told me that is impossible. So then I suggested, okay, put everything in a Docker image, and it tried to create a Docker image and using Docker Compose, and I told it I don't want you to use Docker Compose, use a normal Docker, just create a Docker file and set that up. And it tried for at least a day in order to create a very simple Docker image with just a web server and a MySQL server. And it wasn't really able to do that. So finally, when it tried for the third time to create a Docker Compose script, I said, fine, create a Docker Compose. Yeah, you definitely really want to do that, of course. So do that then. And then it tried to set up the database inside of this Docker container, and at some point I had like 3 or 4 different scripts in order to set up the database, and I said, this is stupid. Can you put them all in one schema? I don't really need 3 different files in order to do the exact same thing. And he said, oh, sorry, and they tried to put it back together again. And then after it had put that up, it had for some odd reason implemented a registration flow with username and password login, which I never asked for. So when I realized that, I said, okay, now we have 2 login flows here. It doesn't make sense. Can you remove that again? So we only have the login flow where we send an email and it logs us in. So it removed that. And it was really annoying, and I don't know how many times I have been required to tell it, you are running in a Docker environment, don't look at my local system for error log files or anything like that, because you will not find the information here. You need to look in the Docker image. And it forgot it over and over and over again, and it tried to, in the Docker image, tail the file in the normal log file, but that file was linked to stdr, which means that it just stood there waiting for input, because everything was sent to the normal error standard out or standard error, which meant that it never got any result and it just failed. So I told it, stop doing that, look at the output of the Docker image instead, and you will have all your information. So over and over again, I've had to iterate that you are running in a Docker environment. You need to use the Docker tools in order to get the right setup. And I don't know how many times when I just tried to do a small design change, it totally destroyed the login flow, and it took it many hours to get it working again. So I was very keen on committing my changes. When it went too far off track, I said, okay, roll back, try again. I know you can do this. So I had to be very patient about this implementation, which has been really frustrating. And then I wanted it to create a router, a very simple router, so I could have nice flow in the application. That took at least a day or 1.5 days to figure out. So many breakages of the login flow again, which was very frustrating. But it finally figured it out and got it working and created a bunch of extra new pages, and it created this registration flow again. And I said, okay, now you have a route to a registration page that is not used and is not even there. It's not, you haven't even created it. I don't want it, remove that. So, of course, I had to iterate on that again. And I also told it, use the CSS framework. And at some point, it started to use a different framework, which it had not even included in the code. So everything looked really weird, which is not really nice. I also said I want a dark background. I want to have a dark mode in the site because everything was white and looked really glaring. And then it added a switch for dark mode for some reason. And the dark mode was not really dark, and the light mode was not really readable because there was gray on white. So it was totally broken. So I said, okay, remove that switch, focus on the dark mode site. And then at some point it added fonts awesome, not even without prompting or anything, it was just there. So I had icons for some reason. I thought that was fine, but a little bit annoying that it just added it because it thought that was a good idea. Then I started to try to get the layout to look somewhat decent. And of course, during all this process, the login flows started to break again, over and over again. And the only thing I wanted it to do is to make the layout of all the pages look cohesive. So it looks like the same site at least. And it took so many attempts in order to get those to look similar. So this by tokens page looks very similar to the original page. And I thought that this was pretty nice looking. So I wanted the manage user page and the dashboard to look similar. And it over and over again broke this page, even though I said I want the other pages to look like this page. And still it changed things, so this page looked totally bad. And then I said, okay, we will not get anywhere with this. So roll back and then move all the styling from this page into a CSS file so we can use that CSS file on the rest of the site. That took 3 attempts in order to just copy paste some styling into a styling document. And when we had done that, I could go over and say, okay, focus on the user page now, use the styles in the style page and get it to look similar to the token page. Don't touch the token page. I needed to be very, very precise with that wording. Don't touch this page. And it was able to do that. Very frustrating. So it took me so many attempts in order to get the styling to look somewhat reasonable. And it kept adding these buttons for registration and logins, so I had to remove those. And then at some point the header up here was double size. It was much higher on 2 of the pages, and it was slimmer on 1 of the pages. So I was like, okay, what's going on here? Can you please fix this padding? And it went so far that I had to say this particular sentence. Great, but the padding 1 RM, 1 RM, 2 RM is not the same as the padding 0, 1 RM used on the dashboard. So I had to tell him it exactly what the padding I wanted it to change in order to get it to change the right padding so I got the right layout. So if I didn't have any web design shops, I would never be able to correct that issue because it just couldn't figure it out. So at one point I said, okay, this looks so bad. Let's revert since the last commit, because the last commit, it looked fine. Revert to that. What do you think it did? It reverted 3 commits, not 1 commit, for some odd reason. So, and then I started to implement this PayPal solution that we didn't finalize. And when I said implement this, it started to explain to me what changes I had to do in order to get it to work. So I guess it got fed up with me as well. So I said, okay, no. I haven't written a single line of code so far. Let's see if you can do it. I believe in you. Come on, let's do it. And it implemented and started implemented it. And then I ended up in a situation where I had to say this particular line, which is, I was so frustrated at this point. Extremely strange way to do this. We have a configuration in the etc directory for the config settings. You also have a doc directory for the database SQL for setting up the database in the Docker image whenever you run the compose up. And there is also a directory doc migrations that you have added at some point. So why add a third way of updating the database and the configuration? It tried to do an even more complicated setup just to add settings. So it tried to add configuration settings in the environment, the .env file, and it created even another place where it put these kind of migrations, and it put it in the web root where you don't want to have these kind of documents. And I also had this line, no, change where you read the configuration. You don't know why you have changed it in the first place, but symlinking to the configuration solves nothing. It tried to create a configuration file in the web root again, and then symlink that configuration file to the actual configuration file, instead of updating the code in order to read the configuration file. So these are some of the frustrating things I had to go through in order for Windsurf to write this very simple application that had taken a lot fewer hours to create myself and a lot less frustration. And I don't think that anyone that doesn't code usually would have been able to set this up. So when does these kind of system make sense then? Well, I would say if I don't know how to use an API at all, and I don't really care about the result, I just want it to set up some test script so I can copy paste that and use it later, and of course verify that it actually does what it should do, then it could be somewhat useful. I had never worked with Mailgun, so I didn't know their API, so it was able to figure that one out. It took a day, but still, it was able to figure it out. So I could probably take that code, make it less brittle and work in a real production environment, but now I at least have an example on how to do it. So that could be useful. Trying to make some kind of GUI changes, not really that great. I even had the workflow where I took a bunch of screenshots and sent them over. I'm not sure if it ever looked at the screenshots, but at least I tried to prompt it with, okay, this looks worse, look at the screenshot, compare it with the previous one. I'm not sure if it actually did it. So this was my week with a really frustrating intern trying to code a simple web page. And I'm not sure if it got smarter during the week. And I started with the light model that is totally free. And I'm pretty much sure that it either is as smart as the paid version, or it can even be smarter than the paid version, because I had more frustrating conversations with the paid version than the free version for some odd reason. So this is what I wanted to cover today. I hope that you found this interesting. Have you tried to vibe code something? What was your experience? Did you solve anything? Did you actually end up in a good state at some point? Did it take you a week, a month, or whatever in order to do a very simple thing? Or did it just create exactly what you wanted right off the bat? I would love to hear your experience on vibe coding. If you like this video, give it a like, share it with your friends and colleagues. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that. If you have any comments or suggestions, leave those in the comment section down below. If you want to support the channel, there are affiliate links and donation links in the video description. And I really hope to see you in the next video.